I was muted and I was singing to you. Sorry. You missed all that. I was like, hello, Mike Brown. Anyway, um, this is recorded, so in the future, somebody will watch this and be like, what the hell? People dancing and singing on this OCI call? So exciting. And you're muted this time.
Funny.
Hello, Brandon. Brandon
Yeah,
Mitchell. Yeah, we're having a dance party.
Dance parties are good.
Yeah. I move that all OCI weeklies should open with a dance party.
second motion.
Yes.
Nice.
I think we might have to take this to executive session.
Right, exactly. Do a SWOT analysis on dancing. Anyway.
Jory, Zoom or no, not Zoom, Slack says that you're over here in the East Coast.
I am. I'm in Boston. Or, well,
Okay.
I'm in Somerville, which is like not actually Boston, but when you live in the greater Boston area, you just say that you live in Boston.
I thought it was like Boston. There's more of an accent in there.
Well, so I'm actually originally from Oklahoma. So central Oklahoma. And
Give it another year or so.
Yeah.
Get that proper Boston accent going on.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, it comes out when I have had too much to drink, or if I'm mad. The Okie accent comes out. But yeah, people say you don't sound like you're from Boston. Well, I'm not.
You don't. You don't have that strong attitude, you know.
No.
There's some vowels missing there.
Yes, exactly.
I'm down in the mid-Atlantic here by just outside of DC. So that was wild. I was like, hey, got another East Coaster here.
And we've got Mike Brown in Texas, right? Or was that right? Yeah. I don't know where I don't remember.
Do we need an OCI map at some point? Start putting pins.
It'd be kind of fun. Be like, where is OCI made? And it's a map of like the whole world. Like pins are everywhere because like standards are global.
We did that for a company all hands a while back because we had gotten about 50 people and we were all remote. And so we all got together. We started putting pins on a map of where everybody's coming from.
Speaking of that though, like I'd love to ask about any plans we have to like get the gang together. You know, if we want to do a OCI meeting at Utah at the KubeCon, or KubeCon in Utah. Is that typically where you guys get together? Just want to make sure we're kind of putting a plan together for that.
I don't think it's been a hard and fast, but traditionally the KubeCons have been, or at least the KubeCon US have been places that Amy has at least gotten us a room, gotten us a couple hours, and get a handful of people to show up. Not all of us, but a handful.
Do we want to do a quick poll of folks on either on the list or in Slack who plan to go this year, so we can get an early indication?
I think that's usually a good idea. We put a question in the Slack general channel that just says, hey, show of hands, who here is going to be making it to such and such an event. And that way gives you an idea of how big of a room to book. And there'll be a few people that don't raise their hand that show up. And there'll be a lot of people that don't raise their hand, makes you get a little nervous, but that just happens.
I'll take an action item to do a poll.
I keep calling it KubeCon US, but guess we could have it in some other part. We've got. I think KubeCon NA is better because potentially we could be in Canada, eh? All right. Enough of the bad accents and other impersonations and whatnot. Marcin, I think you're first up on the list today to chat about what's going on with the image compatibility.
Yeah, so let me give you a short update about that. We have merged all the proposals, and currently I would say we are exploring two possible approaches for the compatibility. The first one is to have an artifact, a separate entity for that. And the second one is to extend or use the reserved fields from the index spec. It's possible that those two solutions could coexist together, but yeah, we are still prototyping stuff and talking about the final design for the artifact itself. And yeah, once we have something ready when it comes to maybe containerd that is using new algorithm from the for the image selection based on this image spec, we can talk about that. And if you have some strong opinion about not using the artifact or using artifact, we can chat. You can chat with us. You can join the meeting, or we can talk about this here. Up to you. Yeah, that's all what I have to say.
Are there questions from the other maintainers about what's happening over there when we eventually approve something and want to merge it over in the main specs, things that other maintainers would be looking for?
Is there a current draft you want maintainers or anyone to look at?
We have multiple proposals. Go ahead, Marcin.
Yeah, I would say maybe it would be easier for the maintainers to take a look, at least for the artifact, but once we have internal consensus in the working group about the final design. So feel free if you like to take a look into proposals, but I'm thinking like it would be maybe better if we have something like ready from the group point of view. What do you think, Brandon? Because I'm thinking like you can be a little bit lost when it comes to these proposals if you go over them one by one. It's a lot of reading, and I thought to do it this way that once we have something ready to show, some prototypes, we can discuss.
Possibly. I just think it might be good for us to hear from maintainers that if they do have a chance to look at the proposals to say, we'd rather see it go in direction A or direction B. Because right now I feel like we're getting to that point of, well, we need to start working on some implementations and see who would be willing to take, accept which PRs from upstream projects. But it might also be good if other maintainers here were looking at saying, hey, had a look over these things, and I don't think there's any way we would ever even consider this proposal. It'll be good to know that now rather than after we go through all the effort of making implementations and whatnot. Does that give you some direction there, Derek?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's just more to avoid the back and forth of working group decided on a proposal, and then maintainers are like, oh no, and then it goes back, and then so if there's anything, especially you think is going to be controversial or uncertain that you want maintainers to focus on early, then I think that'd be helpful. Some of the proposals I've seen in the past were just really long and complicated to try to understand, so it's hard to get feedback on.
That's my point, because Brandon, I think once we wrote the first proposals and the discussion was like quite long, once we like created those proposals, right? So my point is I would like to avoid confusion, like we have this ping pong game. So maybe it would be a good idea that we internally on the working group meeting bring those points that are controversial, and talk to maintainers about what exactly, what kind of things we want to discuss. The first thing that comes to my mind is about using artifacts for image compatibility. So maybe we could discuss that, but I would like to do it like more structure, in the more structured way, because if we send everybody right now to the proposals without context we discuss, it can be messy, at least from my point of view.
That sounds good to me.
I'm also reading Mike's comments there, looking for more directions and whatnot. And you're looking for, Mike, you're looking for people outside the maintainers.
Yeah, unless the work group has already brought in all of the people they believe would have direction, it would make sense to have a review every once in a while of these working group efforts, so that the maintainers aren't surprised at the end.
My thought was that we
And
should at
talk-
least get the maintainers in there. And the maintainers, right
Yeah.
now it's just been me, and so I wanted to make sure that we weren't surprising you.
Yeah,
Not
I
doing
wanted
our
to
work
say
off in the corner.
maintainers, but it also makes sense. There's going to be other, even larger tent people that might have some interest in this.
I would think the biggest ones I'm thinking of right now are the individual runtime projects. So Containerd, Podman, all those different groups out there.
Right, right. I've already sent Marcin at Cortana, who's doing some work in this, for Containerd, but that kind of interaction I think is interesting. But Cortana can't pick it all up, right? It would be probably behoove us to bring in a Docker person or two, for example, with a little experience in the space.
So right now I wonder, would that be okay if
No,
we
it's-
maybe hijack one of the OCI weekly meetings and present the progress, like fully the progress of the working group, giving you the context about the proposals. And later, if you like, I would encourage you to read the proposals itself instead of doing other way around, that you go for the proposals and then discuss with us. Maybe that would be better, just that you have this context, what we are doing and why we decided to do stuff like they are right now.
The other option there is these calls are recorded. And so if we wanted to do it on our Monday call, we had all the different parties available to present their own proposal, we could do it on that recorded and then just say, here's the link.
That also sounds good. Anyway, one of those options, right? Just I'd want to avoid confusion. That's all.
Yeah, I get that you want to avoid confusion. I want to avoid surprises because we've had a history here in OCI, and I'm trying to avoid repeating some of the stuff that happened with the refers API. And I feel like we're going down even a worse path than where we're going with that project, because with refers, we had a lot of buy-in from a lot more people, and we had multiple implementations, multiple groups, and it still came up at the end that folks felt like they weren't involved in some of those decisions early on. And so I want to make sure that we're not going down that same path right now.
I see. So I will just trust your call in here, Brandon, since you have much more experience in that.
Yeah. The other one, the auth working group, is in a much worse place, I'll say. And so I put that on the agenda because when I suggested that we go ahead and put the meetings on hold for that one, I heard from Rom that he wanted to chat about it here. So right now, there's just nobody's got the free time to show up and work on that one right now. There are a lot of people that are interested in the output. I heard someone even today say, hey, we're looking forward to the result of that thing. Nobody's got the time to do it.
What's the main problem the auth working group's trying to solve? Like, besides just having a clear spec, but is there any specific issues people are like waiting on resolution for?
I don't think it's anything for resolution. It's just taking the time to write the spec. We know there's a lot of writing to go involved in that to put together a proposal, and then to make sure that we're not messing anything up. And so no one's had the time to do that. So I would say since February, I don't think we've had any meetings over there that have been anything other than a just quick check-in with 2 or 3 people that just said, yeah, no updates. See you next time.
Question, is this a problem that can be solved with money?
I think it's a problem that can be solved with free time, and we just don't have it. Free time and priorities. We've got a lot of things all happening simultaneously.
Brandon, don't say no.
Yeah, it's like, isn't the answer to that question always yes?
Oh, it's always yes,
I-
Brandon. What do you,
I mean, you
consulting
can-
funding,
You can
yes.
send me money if you want to send me money. I'm not going to tell you not to send me money.
Does money create time for someone, you know, is the question. If there's a trusted party in the community who is like a, you know, a freelancer, they're not currently, their time isn't currently bought by Amazon or somebody, you know, that you all could designate as the editor.
I feel like your point maybe because I'm the semi-retired person here in the group. So
I didn't know that, but if you're semi-retired, like, are you fishing or are you busy?
I'm shopping for the boat right now. So
Do you need money for the boat? Because
maybe we can chat about that offline.
Gonna need a Starlink for the boat.
But yeah, that one at least I wanted to bring up, make it visible, just because I saw, Ram, you had gotten a little concerned when I mentioned that we're going to suspend the meetings for now, and you wanted to chat about today.
The question is not whether there is work to do. I think there are some clear problems to solve there. The issue is, I think it's more about the will to do it. So for all the stakeholders. So let's say we propose some changes, will the registry operators adopt them? Because it could be potentially disruptive for lots of their existing workflows. So these are the concerns really. So, but the problems are very real.
My biggest goal coming out of that is that this doesn't break all the registries, and they just see us finally document the stuff that Docker documented a long time ago, and it's not a big change to start with. That's my hope. If we do something that's going to cause all the registries to be broken, I feel like there might be some objection from a handful of the maintainers here.
Yeah, that's what I was asking, because I mean, you said there's real problems, but I'm just wondering, like, what are, like, I understand, like, there's a lot of stuff that's kind of unspecified, or it's just kind of like implied specified based on what registries and clients actually do. But if there's like specific like clients or registries that like, hey, like, we're really struggling with this, like we need some resolution on it. Like those are kind of what I was kind of wondering, if those kind of problems exist, kind of those burning issues.
Yeah, so that's the thing. I don't think there are any burning issues, so to speak, right? So for example, the V2 ping, just to bring up some examples, right? So if you have a multi-tenant use case where one set of repositories are owned and operated by one group and another set of repositories operated by another group, your entire authentication flow starts with the V2 ping. So how do you respond with the scope and the credentials and all of that for the next set of requests, right? So is it a two-step process? Can we directly go to the repository itself and make those queries and things like that? The second, so none of this again burning, right? So the world is operating as is, no issues there. The other one was so they had a few cases where customers have different types of clients pointing to a registry, and it is much harder to change those clients in this particular case. And one client insists on using bearer, the other client insists on using basic for different things, and depending on the client, right? So now the question is, if you enable, so then you're saying that you can only enable one of them because we are responding with only one of those challenges. So how do we deal with those kinds of issues? So these are some things that have definitely come up.
I don't know how much the client is able to specify to the server that it needs to support a specific authentication type. I feel like that's the server
No, it will.
telling
So
the
for
clients
example,
that
yes, sorry.
the server will tell the clients, hey, here's what you need to do, and the client should support both.
Yeah, so let's say a client can only do better and another client can do only basic. So when you go and ask for access, it's going to come back with multiple authentication challenges. That's allowed on HTTP, by the way, as per the spec, and the client will pick whatever it supports. So the restriction is on the client, not the server side.
Yeah, I think some of that's actually like weird, or it's like client limitations as well. Because I know in Containerd we've tried to solve some of this problem as we've basically made our credential callback flow better. Whereas previously it was just like, hey, here's a host, give me some credentials. But it's like, hey, well, that's not enough. It's like, hey, here's the host and here's the image that I'm trying to fetch to give me the right credentials. And now we're kind of going one step further and say, hey, here's just everything that I have in terms of here's the host that is being accessed, here's the image that's being requested, and here's the www authenticate headers that were returned from the registry, and then let the client make that decision. Like some of that is like, because that comes down to like then the implementation of the credential managers to actually make that decision of, hey, if I have multi-tenancy, I might care about the image name, or if I have two different ways to authenticate, I might care about the www authenticate header. But right now today, the interface from the clients to like their plugins is kind of limited in of itself. More like I'm saying, solving some of those problems may just be, as you said, it's already part of HTTP. If we solve the problems in the clients, maybe some of those aren't really that big of like a specification issue.
Yeah. So
I think the scope one though is like a real important issue, and multi-tenancy I think is an issue that bubbles, or like especially around like the way Kubernetes handles registry auth, I think is very unsafe in some ways. And the fact that we don't have a good way to like scope down auth and stuff kind of at that orchestration level, and like the way that you basically just expect to pass down credentials and then do the equivalent of like a login once you get down to the runtime is not great. But I wonder if like some of those challenges around scoping and logging in can solve some of that, or to the point where we can specify something and then go back to the Kubernetes community and say, hey, here's a better way to do like pull secrets and stuff.
And when I look at some of the OAuth specs and whatnot that we're trying to layer this on top of, they pretty much assume you're only logging in once, and we don't log in once. We log in once per action type per repository. So if you do a pull and you need to upgrade that to do a push, that's a second login. If you go to another repository, that's a third login.
Yeah, I think like, and when we talk about a login is user credentials, and a login should be done by the user, not by the runtime. So like ideally, like when you're doing a login, if you're doing like a kubectl command or something, like you're logging in on your local host. And then when I go to deploy a container, like ideally I have some authentication that's not just taking my password and passing it around the different various orchestration layers, but just having some scoped authentication to, hey, I just need you to pull this one thing, go do that. Sorry, I didn't mean to derail, but yeah, I agree. Like that's an issue.
At least right now, we've been solving that with some kind of personal access token or whatnot instead of the password. But
It's a
Are
good
there
practice
nice-
if you do it. Yeah.
yeah, are there nicer workflows? Possibly. I don't know how much of that we have wanted to go into on this first pass. I think the first pass was mainly just to try to get this thing to a state that we've got the documentation of here's how it works today.
Yeah, but I agree with what you were saying though. It's about, well, what are we layering on top of OAuth to, like, are we trying to solve this by, because some of it, yeah, you do have to layer a little bit on top of OAuth because OAuth assumes a lot of prior knowledge on login.
Yeah. So the main reason for me bringing this up here today was just that group, we acknowledge we have all these issues. No one has time to write them down. I mean, well, we've written down all the issues. No one has time to write down the spec that solves all of them, or at least a proposal to be a spec over there. So just wanted
So
to,
money, somebody to write down the spec sounds like that's not a bad
Just-
place to start.
I just wanted to make awareness just because I know we push stuff off to the working groups and we're expecting the working groups are doing stuff. And I just wanted to make sure folks were aware that not really. In some cases, we push stuff off to the working group and then it just kind of goes off to die over there. And this one's probably significantly worse than what's going on in image compatibility. I'm not sure what's going on in the FreeBSD working group. They've kind of been going off in a whole separate area. They're not on the OCI Zoom, wherever they're meeting, if they're meeting somewhere. So I don't know how to answer on that one. But at least of the two we've got, one was making progress without a lot of maintainer input, and the other one is making no progress. So kind of the quick high-level status on those. And all the progress we're making on the image compatibility goes thanks to Marcin, because he's been driving that one very actively. All right, that was the
What was the other working group you said was struggling, the BSD and the,
there's a FreeBSD working group where I don't know if they're struggling or not. I have no visibility into what's going on over there. Most of our working groups in OCI, we just use this Zoom and we have a HackMD and whatnot. They have a GitHub repo set up. I haven't checked that lately to see if they've done anything with it, but I don't think at least the last check I saw anything over there. And I don't think they've got a HackMD set up. Maybe they do. Haven't seen it. So it was kind of like we made a working group and then silence. Yeah, their GitHub repo. Oh, Sam actually has some stuff over there. He hasn't changed anything from saying it's not a template anymore, but they do have pull requests. So maybe they're doing stuff over in the GitHub repo. But I think we need Sam to come in and say what's going on with that one more than anything else. Oh, Friday at lunchtime. Who picked that meeting time? Unless that's not really. We'll see. I have to go look through the PRs and see what's going on. But it does look like they've been having some meetings over there. All right. Other than that, I dropped my same two PRs that have been sitting out there in the queue for a while to try to get some maintainer visibility on. So the tag pagination and the media types. Feel like the media types, Tianon chimed in on the PR, had some concerns of saying, well, why don't we make the media type unlimited and just allow the other the parameters on the end of that media type to be passed in there, which that feels like that would cause a lot of chaos for a lot of places. To me, maybe others like it. What do folks think about either of those?
I feel like I need a bit of a refresher on the tag pagination one. What exactly are we breaking and fixing on it? I'm actually
one-
not very opinionated on it whatsoever. I hate the tag list API altogether. So like if you break it, I don't care. If you fix it, that's great.
And we are breaking it. This went back and forth so many times, and I kept pairing it back to whatever the group here said. And so this was back on, I guess, the April 4th is where I last made the change note in there. So I think that was that meeting. So we are breaking any clients that are strictly following the spec today by saying registries can come back with a pagination header. And if you don't know how to work with it, too bad, your client's gonna be broken. Clients need to look for that link header. If they see it, they should use it. If they don't see it, they can follow the spec as it is today with putting the extra last field in there and the number of counts and the number of responses they want to see in there. And let's see. I think that was the biggest changes that we just said. You can do the link header. And if you do that, it should be the preferred.
Is there like a significant impact that you've seen in terms of like what the break will be? Because in Containerd, we don't even have support for listing. I don't know that Docker even supports pagination in the first place.
We're going to break anybody that strictly implemented the spec from the client side. We're not going to break registries because registries were already broken.
Well, I was saying, instead of saying anybody, like, do you have specifics of people who would be broken?
Folks that implement it with a curl command. I
Okay,
think
cool.
most clients these days that have written it in like Go or some other language, if they've worked with enough registries, they've eventually run into, more than likely they ran into Quake, because I think their limit is only 50 versus like 1,000 on a lot of other registries. So if you're going to hit it, you're going to hit on Quake first.
Gotcha.
And
yeah, because I know you like have your sync thing that probably
Reg
runs into
client
that more.
uses reg sync a bunch, and so I hit it with that. I think Crane also can do the listing, and I'm pretty sure they've already included the fix in their side. So this is writing the spec to the way clients like Reg Client, Reg Sync, Scopio, I'm sure a bunch of others have all done this because they've hit a bunch of registries that have implemented this way. So it's documenting registries as they are now, but it does break anybody that wrote a client against
technically
the spec.
breaking impact low, risk low. That's the best way to put it.
Yeah. And the reason we went with this break was that we were looking at other options, and folks said, well, yeah, but if you do it the other way and make it a strict change to follow the spec and do a hard break on any client so they get that force feedback, that's going to break all the clients until the client upgrades. And they didn't want to do that.
Okay, sounds good.
Which I get. So it was the least breaking of the breaking changes and the one that folks seem to be most agreeable to. Even John, who had the previous PR and then closed it in a, I'm not going to say a bit of rage, but a disappointment that I chimed in there and was like, what about all these breaking things? He was like, I don't want to deal with this guy. So I think I moved it back to almost the same thing of what John had in there, but maybe slightly softened.
Yeah, technically breaking of something that never really worked isn't really a big deal.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll take a look at it if it's somewhat in a this is how we want to do it phase.
It was after multiple back and forth meetings where this caused a lot of debate from different groups. And the April 4th, we at least had some representatives from Quay on there that gave their opinion that said they wanted to see it this direction. I think John was on that meeting too. He wanted to see it that direction. So we had a lot of buy-in to go this way. And so I made the changes for them.
Have you talked to any Docker Hub folks?
I feel like this is going to align with what Docker Hub already does. This doesn't break any registries. Any registry that worked with the old or that used this link header, I think we just define what they're already doing. This only breaks the clients that strictly implement the spec.
Gotcha. Okay.
Which that's a few and far between. And in the bigger picture of clients out there, not the bigger picture of the number of people that have implemented the spec, but hopefully those people that implement the spec are doing little one-offs here and there. The ones that would be broken by this would be just doing a one-off. All right. Hopefully that's the easier one. The media type one, I feel like that one's gone back and forth with people seeing it, not quite sure what they want to do with it. And I'll throw the link in here. The link is already in our meeting notes, but I'll throw it here in the Slack channel. So, or Zoom chat here. For anybody who wants to follow along at home. Media types, it depends on what you mean when you say a media type, because there is a notation in the RFC that says, here's how you pass a parameter, but it's like, here's how you add a parameter onto the media type. And that's when you go past like the content type header or something like that when you're responding to it. And so what is a media type very much depends on how you're interpreting the spec and how you're interpreting our pointer to the spec. We had referenced in multiple places that we're pointing to this RFC, this section of this RFC. And then folks looked at the next section and said, hey, the next section of RFC talks about how you can have all these other fields in there. So I'm just going to use that. They didn't note that we were limiting it, and we weren't very clear that we were limiting it. And so some people have implemented this assuming that we are limited to just that one part of the RFC, just that 4.2 section. And then other people are looking at it saying, hey, if I can do more than just that and pass parameters, that would be awesome. And so we get this disconnect between the two interpretations. And for folks that want to see an RFC, I'll drop that link in there too. This was the RFC 6838 section 4.2 that we point everything to, and then people keep reading all the way down to 4.3 where they talk about adding the different parameters. And parameters would be like a what's the text, whether or not it's UTF-8 or something like that. They'll add those in there, but we've also seen people want to start putting version numbers and other stuff in there that isn't just the character set that you're using, but it's, hey, I want to version my different media types and have all these going back and forth where it's the same media type, but 3 or 4 different versions. And that's where it got to be a little concerning because I don't think everybody's going to be ready for that to even work. And at least when someone did try to do that, they got a rejection from one of the registries and there was some back and forth between them. And so this was me trying to say, let's clarify in the spec that let's not do parameters. Let's just do the media type without the parameters added on.
Sounds good to me, but I'm not a maintainer on that spec, so.
Yeah. Who do I need to be pinging on this one? Let's see who I'm waiting for reviews on. Tianon gave a review. Wasn't a good review. And Sajay already ran away when he saw I was going to bring this up. And we're getting a little short on image spec maintainers these days, so maybe we need to work on that at some point. All right, that's all I got.
For the tag listing one, I need to update my mirror one, but do you think if we get the tag listing and say that mirroring one in, that would warrant just getting a 1.2 release out? Just
The marrying one, which
the
refresh my
mirror
memory.
namespace one. I need to rebase. It's like the oldest PR. I think it's still open.
Yeah, that one goes way back.
Yeah. Well, we've had it in Containerd since 1.4. But some folks were asking about it. They want it. And so it's like we talked about skipping it for 1.1 again and 1.2. But I think it'd be good if we can just get changes in and just get releases out. Not have
So-
each release be such a big thing.
So you got this Containerd today. What registries does it work with?
Well, it's not something that registries would use. It's something that you would use for like a proxy cache.
Which proxy cache is out there?
None are using it that I know of. Some folks are
Yeah.
talking about using it. Yeah.
And I've contemplated writing my own proxy at some point here. It's on the agenda.
Yeah, I don't
sometime
have
I wanna
time to
write somewhere.
write something like that. I think it'd be cool to have something like that, but right now it's like nobody's gonna write one because I guess you could write one that's just used which works with Containerd, but it's like you can't really write one today because you can't actually proxy multiple registries. So we have the ability to do it in Containerd, but we need people asking for it, but I don't know who's going to go implement it. There is
I
an
think one of
implementation
the
I
s-
want though.
One of the big slowdowns, I think, comes from Docker's implementation of the proxy, only proxying Docker Hub for the longest time. And so moving
That's
over to
something I'm
Containerd over
fixing.
there is going to help, I hope.
Yes, I'm fixing that.
Thank you. That will make a lot of people happier.
Oh, which PR?
Charlie wants the PR. Now I gotta go on a
Let's see.
scavenger hunt.
I think it's just the bottom of the list. Yeah.
Actually, we only have 15 in here.
The very last one.
Add registry proxying settings,
Oh.
6.6.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, I need to update it. We put it on hold then there was like a refactor. I didn't refactor it because we were going to do another release, but I guess it's more I want to get it. My hope is it had enough approval that people would be willing to go implement something like that. But I have a feeling that until it's there, we're not going to see an interesting implementation. But yeah, everything is there on the Containerd side. Docker with the Containerd integration. I'm hoping the next release of Docker will actually have full support for that. I'm pushing for that. I have a PR open that will do it. So
I'm looking forward to that. I'm gonna have to update some of my Stack Overflow answers, assuming I don't delete them.
yeah, we'll be using. Well, my idea is I'll be using the host configuration that Containerd has, which is much more flexible.
Yeah. That it is. I like it in spirit. And like I say, I've got on my not too soon agenda, but at some point I would like to make a proxying registry. I wrote the registry, so now it's just adding the proxy part onto it.
Yeah, and I mean, it's been a tricky one because not having an implementation, not having support in the runtimes, but we do have support in Containerd now where you can set like a default, basically to like override everything to go through a single proxy, which I think would make that useful, but we'll see. It seems like it's something people have been asking for years, but since nobody actually built that.
Have we chatted with the folks over on Podman to see if they're interested or if they've already done it over there?
No, I have not talked to them. If I talked to them, it would have been years ago when I opened this, which was 2019.
2019. Yeah.
So things we added to the community.
They might have changed things since then.
Did it even exist back then? Probably not. I don't even know.
Not sure. It's been a long while though. Okay. Yeah, like I say, in spirit, I like the idea. Just need to spend some time going through it.
Okay, I'll update it so it's, at least it's a updated spec.
Um,
or
in a
updated for
mergeable
latest.
state.
Yeah.
And the way we had gone through this before, I'm just rereading this right now. Was it parameters on the URL?
Yeah,
how-
basically the summary of the problem today is like when we communicate with registries over the API, we actually lose what namespace the image is in. Because yeah, if you were talking to a docker.io image, but you're now proxying to somewhere else, like you don't know that it was docker.io or quay.io or something. So the registry doesn't actually have all the information it needs to determine what upstream or namespace to apply to the image. And the reason I call it namespace is because whether it's a host or not is kind of irrelevant. It's just there's a namespace that can be prefixed to the image reference or image repository name that gets appended to. So I mean it is a host, but in theory it doesn't really matter. It's just a prefix, or it's just a namespace prefix to whatever repository was there. And obviously that gets interpreted as the host, but it's not relevant from the API perspective.
And I'm just rereading the text there. You're saying this shouldn't be sent for requests that are not going to a proxy. And so if you're going straight to the registry, it's one field you wouldn't have. So it's only for those proxy requests.
Yeah, so basically if the HTTP host header matches the namespace, then it's redundant information. So basically saying if
And-
it's not there, then you should use HTTP host header to determine the namespace.
And the namespace is just the host value at that point.
Yeah, it's gonna be, well, yeah, whatever host file. I mean, in theory, on the runtime side, you don't have to use a real host to resolve an image. You can use anything. In theory, we don't do that in practice, but the whole notion that it's like host / repository name is kind of an invisible standard.
I'm of two minds on this one. One is to say, do we loosen up the definition and make the host more of a namespace? Or the other is, do we say this namespace is just the host?
I don't mind saying that. I mean, I don't think that it's like, I don't mind saying that the namespace is the host. But yeah, I don't want to get too into the weeds in terms of like repository naming discussions, or repository name versus like full image name discussions, which I think we've mostly avoided in this group. Although it
Sometimes
has
sometimes
bit
it
us a few
bites us.
times, like in the archive, image archive and stuff.
Well, we've had people have looked at our spec and said, hey, you have name and reference, but they said your name doesn't have the port for the port number. And I was like, well, we don't have that anywhere in this spec because we don't really specify the host name here. It's just assumed you're connecting HTTP to that host name. And I think they were reading the distribution spec expecting us to specify what reference is. And the reference was always defined by the distribution project and not by us, which
I mean, I don't mind adding some
Volume.
verbiage there, like implementers notes. It's been a not a fun topic to define what exactly that format is. I know the distribution project has a format, and Containerd, we tried to widen it out even more. Mostly because from the perspective of like the runtime, it doesn't matter. It's only like, hey, I have an image name and now I want to synchronize it with some remote over an API. And at that point you have to, it kind of goes into the problem we had before. It's like you go from zero knowledge, all I have is this string, to like, now I need to know, how do I authenticate to this host? How do I talk to this host? You know, what are the credentials for this host? Like, is it TLS? Is it MTLS? Like all this kind of stuff. Like there's a whole plethora of like unsaid configuration that goes into that little string.
as much as I'd like to keep it loose, I'm also thinking about how people would implement this and how they would read it. to implement it. And if they don't have that context that you've got, they might not know that that's a host name.
Yeah, and as I said, I think it's fun to put that in implementers notes and maybe even have like a superset of the definition. I don't want to get, I don't want to put too much there.
We've got a bit of that at the top of the spec. And that is, I think I've gone through and tried to clean it up a bit, and that's gone back to debate at some point. But we do have a whole section at the top that has definitions. And so if you want to add an extra entry in there that just says, hey, the namespace is this, although we have name in there, which that's also a namespace for the repository name.
Yeah, that's a tricky one. Is a name a namespace plus a repository name, or is a namespace just a modifier on a name? I agree. We should. I'll think about that. I rebase it to clean it up because maybe sometime I have a better idea than before, but previously it's just a little bit of a mess to understand.
Yep. So in theory, I like it. In practice, add a definition to the top and then make it mergeable. And we can go back through and see what we can clean up on that debate. The non-blurry thumbs up.
You know,
Zoom is fighting you sometimes. All right. Anybody else have stuff you want to chat about today? Folks want 10 minutes back. Mike, you've been quiet over there.
Oh, well, I'm listening.
You just over there petting the dog?
Well, no, I was in the background trying to figure out what we're doing in Red Hat container operating system, image caching and proxying.
I mean, today I had someone from the artifact group on a thread that wants to make a universal, I go find this again, a universal object repository based on OCI, and I'm not quite sure what's going on over there. My brain is hurting. So that might be another meeting for me to figure out what's going on. I can always drop if anybody is curious about it, in the CNCF Slack, the WG-artifacts channel has some interesting discussions that might be related to this.
We had
I
labs
never knew your
growing
house
up.
went. I never knew your house went that direction.
Oh,
I just always assumed that was a wall.
Oh no, this is upstairs. That's the bar.
There's a whole side I never knew that existed of you, Mike.
Oh no! All right, let's see if we'll turn it around. You'll be like, oh, what? Wait.
I knew there was exercise equipment. I never knew there was TV screen. Yep.
Yeah.
Side of Mike's place we didn't know existed.
Computers are behind that wall. Yeah.
My goodness, get the full tour here.
The iMac is not a very good tool for moving videos around. It's a 27 5K iMac.
All this time from the bar with the way it was, I figured that might have been like, I wasn't sure, maybe like bookshelves against a wall, and then the white sphere was top of the wall there. Never realized that was a bar.
There you go.
Jory's asking the important
I need to
questions,
put
so
more
it's
stools there. I need to put more stools up.
What's the dog's name, Mike?
This is Daisy.
Daisy. All right.
Daisy.
Attendance. Daisy, yellow lab.
Yep.
All right. Thank you for your attendance, Daisy. I also like to ask my groups what they would like to put on the agenda for next time. So that helps us sort of be prepared ahead of like the next meeting. So I'll ask this question. You can say nothing. I don't want to answer your question, Story. But I would love for you to pontificate on what you would like your agenda to be next week.
We also have a Slack notification set up every week that pops up and says, hey, anybody that wants to discuss anything, add it to the agenda. And this time I think Rob was the one. No, I think it was Marcin. Unless it was me, but I think it was probably Marcin that was the productive person to actually add our agenda item. Because we added the image compatibility working group update. Without awesome people like you, we would have had 0 agenda to start with. So every once in a while, someone does do that. You're getting all the credit today, Marcin. Got the one working group is doing some productive stuff.
Yeah, that's too much credit.
All
All right.
right.
But yeah, there is the weekly Slack reminder that pings us all and says, hey, put stuff on the agenda. So we're just like this, Jory. I wish we were
Awesome.
better.
No. I mean, like, that's great. I'm not fully used to your ways yet. I will learn. So I appreciate that.
It
you
doesn't
do
have to be you learning. It can be us learning to be better. We're just like this.
that. Never hurts to ask multiple times. Does anybody have any agenda items? So.
All right. Is there anything you want to ask us, Jory? After this,
She just
No,
did.
I mean, yeah, so
Uh,
I did take your notes today in the HackMD. If you want to double check that I didn't write something completely stupid, always appreciate a look at that. But I don't have any questions for you guys. I recorded some action items. Anything that's an action item will be followed up on at the next call, right? So if there's an action, Derek's going to rebase a PR. I'm going to be like, Derek, rebase PR.
I have a question
Hey,
for you,
shoot.
Tori.
Yeah.
Gotta get that done then for next week.
You mentioned the possibility of new standardization processes for OCI, or at least in the last call. I think a little bit about more formalization.
So I mean, we chatted about, working on something of a tenets or principles or some similar kind of
Right.
document. And I think Sajay had kind of mentioned it, got to this a little bit, which is like, hey, do we have a framework or a rubric or something that we can evaluate this again? These sorts of assets could be helpful for the creation of said rubric. And I don't, if that feels like a worthwhile exercise for the group to undertake, I'd be very glad to help kind of just facilitate the discussion. So Brandon, you can be more of a participant as opposed to, having to drive that. But I also don't, I'm not here to force you to do anything that doesn't feel good, right? So if you don't think it would be useful to you, then be like, bugger off, Jory. But if you do think it might be an interesting, at least a conversation to realign everybody, then like, let's have it. There's no one's getting married here. We're just gonna talk about it. And I'm sorry for being so like casual and familiar, like, oh, but that's how I am.
there go my weekend plans. Not getting married.
I think it makes sense to at least open up for the greater discussion at the talk level and/or some issue in the project level for OCI that we might consider some at least definition of our formalization patterns that you see that might be missing or others see that might be missing. I think it's worthwhile at least discussing it. Maybe an agenda item for the next KubeCon. You're on mute.
Yeah, I was gonna say that those kinds of conversations do tend to go better when you can get a group, even a small group, in person, because then like if it's helpful, we can grab stickies and do, that kind of stuff.
And sometimes we'll just open an issue for discussion for a thread, right? And people can poke in that kind of thing.
I wonder how much that might depend on us getting a critical mass of maintainers. And right now we're at a tough spot to make that happen.
Yeah. I didn't realize we were short on image again until you mentioned it.
Well, we had 2 drop off. And so 2 people dropping off, that puts more weight on the rest of them to chime in.
Okay. Alrighty.
All right.
That's all I had.
Well,
Thanks.
that's the rest of that week. See everybody next time.
All right. Bye all.
Thanks.